Greetings, friends and Firebirds fans, and welcome to the Fire and Ice podcast presented by Desert Willow Golf Resort. Fire and Ice, the official podcast of your Coachella Valley Firebirds of the American Hockey League. Coming to you from Palm Desert, California. I'm your John Hayden, forecheck away from the Birds Barn of Acrisure Arena. I'm your host, Judd Spicer. Along with this endeavor, also again have the privilege and the pleasure of serving as your Firebirds insider in this sophomore season of CV hockey. Those Firebirds insider articles may be found online, as with all things Coachella Valley Firebirds. That's your web home and hub of cvfirebirds.com, where you're going to want to go from everything including but not limited to tickets, roster, staff, community, merchandise information. Per those Firebirds tickets, and yes, there will be more to purchase, friends. Might I also suggest downloading the handy CV Firebirds app on your mobile device. Great way to get tickets for everything going on, parking included, at the Birds Barn of Acrisure Arena. Per the presenting sponsor of this endeavor, Desert Willow Golf Resort, a mere 3+ miles away, right down the street from Acrisure Arena. Get your tee times online for the Mountain View and Firecliff courses, respectively. Although right now, the Firecliff undergoing some reno work to the greens, a little work being done to the tee boxes as well. So get those tee times for the Mountain View course. Make it a great putt-to-puck day. Get your round in over at the Mountain View. Skate it right on over to Acrisure Arena for a Birds game in the eve. Again, those tee times found at desertwillow.com. All right, dudes, not alone on this episode of Fire and Ice. We have another media roundtable, as we enjoyed per the last series, the victory over Calgary. We do it again for this series, and I'll be honest, this date, this visit, was scheduled probably not anticipating that the Firebirds would advance 3-goose. Yeah, I did predict that the Firebirds would win this series in 4, but didn't think that they'd get it done with a sweep. Bring out the broom. 3 straight games over the Ontario Reign. Firebirds advance for the second time in as many years of their existence to the Western Conference Finals. Joining me on this episode to discuss as much, Tim O'Brien. Yeah, you know Tim. He's your in-arena host over at Acrisure. Also your NBC sports anchor covering the Firebirds. From the Desert Sun newspaper, our guy Andrew John returns to the Fire and Ice podcast, And our third guest this week, you know, where I come from, we'd call this guy a mensch. We call him a man. We call him a gentleman. He's an upstanding fella. He's the senior manager of communications and content for the Ontario Reign. Jared Shafran also joining the media roundtable. And look, they lost. They lost in 3 straight games. Jared could have called me and said, "Nah, dude, the series is over. I'm done. I don't want to join. I don't want to discuss what happened." But he's a mensch. He's a good guy. He's an upstanding dude, and he is joining us on this media roundtable as well to discuss in a past tense at this stage what was in the Firebirds' 3-0 series sweep and advance over the I-10 rival Ontario Reign. Before segueing directly into that conversation, however, take a step back at what was over the course of this Round 3 divisional final, Reign versus Firebirds. As referenced enthusiastically, I hope and trust a couple times, a 3-0 sweep for the Birds. Game 1 Wednesday of last week came down from an early 0-1 hole to win that game by a score of 3-2. Game 2 last Friday, one of the probably most physical, if not violent, hockey games I've seen in a long, long time, if not perhaps ever. Very, very physical brand of hockey in Game 2, of which the Firebirds came out on top 5-3. That game, of course, resulted in a 2-game suspension for Reign forward Hayden Hodgson, the hit that he put on Shane Wright. Neither of those players appeared in the deciding, what proved to be the deciding, I should say, Game 3, which took place at Toyota Arena Sunday evening in Ontario, which the Birds again fell behind, in this instance 0-2. It was 0-2 after the first period. A couple of goals by Cole Lind. Firebirds came back to win 3-2, take the series 3-0. Again, coming behind in games 1 and 3 of a very good series against a very good Reign team. We thought it would be close. We thought it would be tight. Not certain by any stretch that this was going to be a sweep for the Birds, but that was ultimately the case. Proved the first sweep in playoff franchise history. Firebirds also set another record. They actually did that with the win in Game 2 of consecutive playoff wins. They have now won 6 straight playoff games after dropping the first versus Calgary last year. And of course, the inaugural season, Birds franchise record of consecutive playoff wins was 4. That included the latter 2 games against Milwaukee, sliding into the first 2 games versus Hershey in the Calder Cup Championship Finals. Tell you what, dudes, depth is a dagger for these CV boys. Over the course of the entirety of these playoffs, that counts Calgary and Ontario, both of those series collectively, Firebirds have received multiple points from 17 different players. They've also received goals. They've received scores from a dozen different players over the course of these 2 series. 6 points apiece for Max McCormick, Devin Shore, and Andrew Podorowski. 5 points apiece for Messrs. Fleury, Lind, Wright, Studenich, and Hughes. Per Shane Wright, again, he did not appear in Sunday's deciding Game 3 of the Ontario series. Asked about it after the game, head coach Dan Bilesma said that Shane Wright lobbied hard to appear in that game, and now with a lengthy break before the Western Conference Finals, which we'll get to momentarily, appears, if not readily appears, that we will see Shane Wright, number 51, for the Birds back on the ice come those Western Conference Finals. Stats versus Ontario specifically, 8 different goal scorers across the 3 games, all wins for the CV Firebirds. That includes 2 apiece for Jimmy Schultz and fellow defenseman Cale Fleury. Cole Lind with his 2 goals, including the game winner in Game 3. Those were his 2 in the series. Also received goals versus Ontario from the likes of Max McCormick, Devin Shore, John Hayden, Yanni Newman, and the aforementioned Shane Wright. Per the netminder, Chris Drieger, great regular season. He's been even better in these Calder Cup playoffs. Of course, Chris has started all 7 games. 6-1 mark versus Calgary and Ontario. Cumulatively, a 2.39 goals against with a 9.21. That's a .921 save percentage for Chris in these playoffs, specifically versus Ontario. Chris Drieger went 3-0 with a 2.35 goals against and a save percentage versus the Reign of .922. Chris Drieger, as you may have heard me mention in a recent episode, if not the last one, hey, dude started 3 NHL Stanley Cup playoff games, had never before played in an AHL Calder Cup playoff game. He's looking very much ready for that netminder starring role. Again, 6-1, 6 consecutive wins in net for Chris Drieger for the Firebirds. One more note per that depth. 4th line, by the way, been excellent across the course of these Calder Cup playoffs, having scored goals in 5 of the 7 playoff games to date. As far as what's next, well, deeper and deeper we go into the playoffs. Higher and higher the Birds fly, and now we have to pause those wings. Kind of like we did during that bye week, friends, although not as lengthy a pause, but it is likely going to be 9 days. As of this recording, the other Western Conference series currently being played, that would be Milwaukee versus Grand Rapids. While our series is done, they've played just 1 game. This Monday evening, they will get game number 2. Grand Rapids leads that series 1-0. Again, game 2 taking place this Monday evening. Face one of those teams. Of course, as fans will remember, we felled Milwaukee last season in 6 games to take that Western Conference Championship, the banner of which hangs aloft proudly in Acrisure Arena. Birds have faced neither Grand Rapids nor Milwaukee this year. Little bit of wait and see. Got to see how that series plays out. From what I've been told, this is not the gospel. Those Western Conference Finals are going to start approximately on Wednesday, May 29th. So we might have about 9 days of non-game hockey while we're ready for those Western Conference Finals, which will eventually prove a best-of-7 format, a 2-3-2, home-away home. The series will start right here in Palm Desert at Acrisure Arena. All right, Firebirds friends, all that offered, all that prefaced, let's get to this episode's Media Roundtable.
All right, Firebirds flock, as prefaced and promised, a cavalcade of stars on this Media Roundtable episode of the Fire and Ice podcast. Didn't necessarily schedule this date in this episode, assuming that the series would be over, but nonetheless, that has been the case. To discuss as much, let me welcome and introduce Tim O'Brien. He's your Acrisure Arena in-arena host and NBC sports anchor. Andrew John covers the Firebirds as sports reporter for the Desert Sun newspaper. And gracious to join us despite the series conclusion, Jared Shafran is our host last night. Showed us a fine time at Toyota Arena in Ontario. He's the senior manager of communications and content for the Ontario Reign. Also really enjoyed prepping for the series and reading about the Reign side of it via his work for the LA Kings Insider and listening to his work as co-host of the Reign Check podcast. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining. Thank you for your time. Jared, we will start with you first. Would you be in concurrence that did not anticipate having this visit today with the series over?
No, I mean, I do think that Coachella Valley, I was able to watch a lot of the Firebirds last season, watch their run to the finals, and knew that they had a lot of returning players with a lot of experience, and there was some unfinished business there. I think they're a bit of an older team, so I think that, hey, if you told me the Firebirds would win the series, I wouldn't be surprised. I just think that, a little bit surprised that it ended up being 3-0, especially after Ontario won its first 5 playoff games. You're kind of looking at, okay, this team looks like they've got a good run in them. Beating Abbotsford 3-0, I thought was pretty impressive the way that all went down. So definitely a little bit surprised it was 3-0. But when you look at the games, the Reign had some good moments in those games. I just don't think they had enough to actually get over the top and win any of them against a Coachella Valley team that was so deep. The Firebirds, all four lines, incredibly impressive. And I think the biggest difference in the series was the goaltending. I think Eric Portillo is a good goaltender. He might one day make it to the NHL. I think he still probably needs another year or two in the AHL, and he had a great start to the playoffs. But Chris Drieger's a veteran goaltender who's been there, and I think the difference showed between what Drieger's capable of and his calmness and the way that he was in net versus a rookie in Portillo who's just learning his ropes in the pro game here.
Yeah, we'll come back to that goaltender facet. Follow-up for you, Jared. I mean, we anticipated, I think, all of us, this series to be close. Firebirds had a great season. The Reign had a great season. As you referenced, the Reign won all 5 of playoff games in the initial rounds, and it's not as though it wasn't close. I mean, it was 3-2, 5-3, and then Game 3 concluded 3-2 when we were down 2-goose after the first period. So it was, at the same time, competitive. I mean, did you feel that way from your side of it? That you didn't come out on top in any of the games, but that it was all the games were close and competitive?
Absolutely. And I think the first game was, Marco Sturm spoke after the game, the Reign head coach, and he kind of said, man, we really needed to win that first game. The Reign did take the initial lead in Game 1. They outshot Coachella Valley almost 2-1. They kind of stunned the crowd a little bit for little moments at Acrisure Arena, and I think not finding a way to win that game and finding a way behind it was the end of the first period. Coachella scored twice in about 102 to take the 2-1 lead, and it was kind of like, oh man, we're playing well, but we're losing. And I think a lot of the series was that feeling for Ontario, like we're playing pretty well, but we're losing. And I think that's why I'm saying Coachella Valley earned it, because even though they weren't always the better team the entire 60 minutes, they found ways to win, and that's what good teams do. And I think that's what the Reign were doing against Bakersfield, Abbotsford, and even down the stretch in the regular season. Maybe they weren't always the better team, but they found the ways to win, and they weren't able to do that against Coachella Valley, and that speaks to how good this Firebirds team is right now.
NBC's Tim O'Brien bring the same big and broad question to you, sir. Did you anticipate, again, scheduled this about 6 days ago, did you anticipate we'd be talking today with the series already concluded?
No, definitely not. I think initially I think I had said Firebirds in 4, but after that first game, this could go the distance for sure. Go 5, and to kind of piggyback with Jared, they did play well enough to get a game or two. I think at certain points, even after that 3-goal first period the other night, I never felt comfortable against the Reign. If that makes sense, that's a good team, man. And last night, they came out hot. I said, this is going to get ugly. Going to get ugly quicker than it's going to get better. I think that first period last night was one of, Dan Bosma said that they thought they played well. I think, Andrew, you and I said, I guess I don't know hockey as well as I thought, because I didn't feel that way at all. I didn't see it that way. So I thought, Ontario absolutely could have won a game or two in the series. They earned it. That first game, I guess, is one of those, you go back to the locker room after the game. So how the hell did we not win that game? I definitely didn't think it was going to be over when we scheduled this, to answer your question.
Andrew, John, you and I had ample opportunity during games 1 and 2, respectively, before even talking again last night. I know that neither of us anticipated the series to be concluded. I think that we were in concert in being a little bit worried about this one. The Reign ultimately played very well, but, did you feel like you were sweating the series of what potentially could be?
Yeah, I think that it was definitely, to go back to what Jared was saying, I think that if you're the Reign, you have to be pretty disappointed, because this is a very talented Reign team that had opportunities to get in this series and make it a 5-game series and probably even win the series, because they played well, especially in games 1 and for a large part of game 3. Game 2, there were moments as well, but very talented team, and we definitely thought it was going to go longer. And I think that the reason why, I may have, last night before, we talked before the game, I did think that the sweep was in early, just because it's hard for a team down 0-2 in a 5-game series to really get back in it, and the Firebirds were really cooking. But yeah, then they went down that in that first period, and I definitely thought it was going at least 4 at that point. It's just really interesting to see, again, as it's been talked about, the Firebirds finding ways to win, and I think that's, kind of what's been the difference between this year and last year is we were sweating every game for the Firebirds, and for them at least. And then this year, it's there's some tight moments, but just feels like the veteran presence and the talent is just kind of overtaking.
Over the course of the 3 games, 11 goals for the Firebirds, 7 for the Reign. And I guess that's kind of what surprised me. I mean, look at all the talent, the scoring talent that Ontario had over the course of the season. For this series, Akil Thomas, 0 goals. Charles Hudon, 0 goals. Fagemo, 1 goal. Madden, 1 goal. That really stands out to me. I thought that there'd be a bit more output. Excellent Reign power play over the course of the season, second in the entire AHL. I think a goal away from being tops in the American Hockey League. 3 for 10, so they did still do okay on the power play, but it kind of surprised me. I thought that we held those guys in check. Jared, I'll bring it back to you. What surprised you most about how this series played out?
I think nothing. I don't know. I'm not really that surprised. I do think, like you said, these are the points of where the series is won and lost, and the power play is certainly one of those things for the Reign. And you're right. When you look at the statistics, hey, they scored 3 power play goals. It's not that they weren't able to score, but 2 of them came when the Firebirds had a multiple goal lead already in the 3rd period of game number 2. So the Reign were trying to get back in the game, and that did help them kind of at least stay within a few goals. But they didn't get the power play goals when they needed them. And last night was the perfect example. We're recording this on Monday. That the game 3, there was a penalty called that honestly kind of was a 50-50 type of a play with 2 minutes left in the game in a 1-goal game. The Reign super fortunate to get that call, because I don't think it was an egregious penalty by any stretch. And so I'm thinking, wow, this is it. They have to come through. And they had the zone time. They had the looks. But you mentioned it. They got Fagemo, who led the league in power play goals during the regular season. He wasn't able to get a shot through. And Coachella Valley, their defense was ready for that. They were prepared for that. And Chris Drieger was prepared for that. And then Charles Udon, who led the league in power play goals 2 years ago, he wasn't effective in that opportunity. So those are the players that you need to be your best. You need those guys to step up. Look at the difference. Cole Lind scored twice yesterday. He's one of those guys that Coachella Valley needs to score if they're going to move deep into these playoffs. He scores 2 goals in a clinching game. The Reign did get a goal from Alex Turcotte, who's one of their top 6 forwards, and Tyler Madden ended up scoring as well. But I feel like in those big moments, the best players for the Reign weren't their best, and that's the difference to me in this series. You got guys like Max McCormick and Andrew Podorowski who are leading their team, and I think TJ Tynan had a pretty good series. But again, you need TJ Tynan and you need Samuel Fagimo, and some of those top end players had to be a little bit better for the Reign to compete a little bit more in the series. Again, they were competitive, but to win a game, to win 2 games, to win the series, they had to be at their best. And I think they weren't able to get it going the way that they have, down the stretch. And you mentioned Akil Thomas. I thought Akil Thomas struggled in this series. Again, positionally, defensively, I think he was okay, but on the offensive end, he just didn't seem like he was able to get his clean shot off. He didn't seem like when he did have a look, he kind of put it right into the chest of Drieger. So I didn't think that he was at his best, and I think he's a guy who might be in the NHL next season. He's very close to making the LA Kings lineup, but I don't know that anything completely surprised me in the series because, again, I've seen Coachella play. They're so good off the rush. They attack so quickly. It seems like anytime you make a mistake, and like I was looking at Cole Lind's goal, and it was funny on the broadcast last night. I was actually speaking about I thought the Reign were pretty good in the face-off circle in Game 3, and they were winning a lot of face-offs, which was generating some of their best opportunities. They had an offensive zone face-off in Coachella Valley's end, and they lost the face-off to the Firebirds. And if you watch that play move up the ice, the coverage from Ontario, not good. And about 8 seconds later, you've got Cole Lind, one of the best scorers in the league, literally wide open on the doorstep. There's nothing Eric Portillo can do. How do you go from having a face-off in the offensive zone, maybe when you're threatening, and moments later, it's 46 seconds into the third period, you're now losing 3-2. Like, those things can't happen in these types of series against this type of Coachella team. They will make you pay for it. Dan Bilesma, he's got his team ready to go. They made a great play and exposed Ontario's transition defense, and I think that happened a little bit too often in the series.
Tim O'Brien, aside from the 3-0 outcome sweep of the series, what in particular may have surprised you about how this played out?
Chris Drieger. I think he had a nice, wonderful regular season. He played well, won 3 straight down the stretch with Calgary. But I've said here on this show, the bar was set high last year, right, with Joey, and Joey could steal that 2-1 game, and I just never felt at any point before this series that Drieger could steal that 1-goal game late, and he proved me wrong. I mean, he was really lights out after that 2 goals that he let in last night. Now, defensively, I think that team has blocked about 18 shots in the final 2 minutes combined the last 2 games, so that certainly helps. But he's really impressed me and stood on his head, and he's might have that pedigree after all. So he's really making me eat my words.
Andrew, John, we've sat together, not just the playoffs, but over the course of the season, watched a lot of Birds hockey together over this series with the Reign. What in particular surprised you?
Well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a big surprise, but I think one thing that I've definitely noticed is during these playoffs, the Firebirds have gone from, a team that we know can score, has a lot of offensive firepower, guys who can do things in the offensive zone, to, really winning games defensively. I think that's one shift we've seen this year. And you got to give Chris Drieger a lot of credit. He's played great. You could argue he only allowed 1 goal last night because the goaltender interference was a possibility there on that second goal. But the truth is, defensively, they've never played this well. They've never blocked as many shots late in games. They've really been helping him defensively. And we asked Dan, I can't remember if it was after game 1 or 2. I think it was after game 1 of this series when we just flat out asked Dan about how much better this year's defenses compared to last year. And Dan, who's usually pretty cagey about saying, he doesn't say a lot of things definitively. He had no problem saying definitively this team is a way better defensive team than it was last year. That's kind of a scary thought when you consider how good this offense is. And this team went to Game 7 of the Calder Cup final last year. So if this team really is that much better defensively, which I think is a development that we've really noticed this postseason, then that really bodes well for the Firebirds. And I think that that's something to keep an eye on.
Friends, you're tuning into the Fire and Ice podcast presented by Desert Willow Golf Resort. My cavalcade of guests include Tim O'Brien from NBC, Jared Shafran, he's the senior manager of communications and content for the Ontario Reign, and Andrew John, sports reporter, covers the Firebirds for the Desert Sun newspaper. Gents, preceding this series, our head coach Dan Bilesma, we had asked him about the Reign rivalry or the I-10 or the Freeway 10, people call it different things, and he said to us, following the Calgary series, he's like, a rivalry really doesn't start until you face a team in the playoffs. What we saw in Game 2 was not just a physical game. It was a brutally violent hockey game. It was very much a playoff rivalry-style game. What resulted of that, unfortunately, a Shane Wright injury in concurrence with a Hayden Hodgson 2-game suspension. We also had, and this is, I'm not going to mention the name of the local business, but there was some controversy here about a business running a Reign promotion here locally. Apparently that's something that came on high from a corporate entity, but it's those kind of things across a meeting or a matchup that do instill over time rivalries. Jared, I'll bring it back to you. After the things I mentioned that occurred in this series, do you feel that the Firebirds and the Reign now have a legitimate rivalry moving forward?
Yeah, I think they always had a rivalry. I agree with what Dan Bilesma said, though, because when you meet in the regular season, you start to get to know each other. I mean, these teams played 16 times over the last 2 seasons. They're very familiar with the styles of play. But when one team ends another season, that kind of creates the rivalry, because now the Reign are going to have players that come back to this roster, and whenever they face Coachella Valley, they're going to think about the sweep. They're going to think about their season being over. They're going to think about what you explained, all the different things that happen during the course of a playoff series. It sticks in your mind more than just going to play a regular season game at Acrisure Arena or the Firebirds coming to Toyota Arena. Yeah, there's some physicality during the regular season, but again, it gets ramped up to the next level, and you're playing for a championship. So it definitely sparks a new era of the rivalry, I would say. I think it was always a rivalry because you've got, anytime that we're at Acrisure, there's a ton of Reign fans there. It's great support from both sides. I love the fact that they're so close down the freeway that it's very easy for both sides to come to each other's building. Anytime the Firebirds are at Toyota Arena, we're always going to see the red in those stands. So I think the rivalry is there. It's just it's now on the next level because of the Firebirds ending the Reign season. And I think I love those things, like all this different stuff going on in the playoffs. Like this is what I wanted when Coachella Valley was coming to the league. I was like, this is amazing. This is great for the Pacific Division. This is great for hockey in Southern California. Like, as an employee of the Reign, I'm like, this is perfect. Like, we can have these fun things and do these things with a local team like this. So I think this is exactly what we needed to happen. We needed a playoff series against Coachella Valley, and especially having it happen after the Firebirds had all that success last year, it just kind of amps it up to another level. I think for some Firebirds fans maybe weren't even aware how close the Reign were, what kind of traditions that the Reign have as a team that's been in the league for a while now. So I think it just kind of opened up people's minds of, wow, this is really cool. Next year I'm going to come to some more road games at Toyota Arena because I want to see my Firebirds teams more than 36 times in the season. So I think that's all really good stuff.
For Jared's point, the fans was pretty awesome. All 3 games. Certainly Game 2, a lot of Ontario, a lot of silver and black jerseys in the Acrisure Arena stands. And then last night, even just driving along the 10, I saw a lot of people in Firebird sweaters and with Firebirds flags on their cars, kind of a caravan. And there were a lot of people that bust out, and I'm sure it left a bad taste in the Toyota arena ears to hear Firebirds fans chanting after the game was over and walking out those doors by the hundreds. That is a memory that's probably not going to be soon forgotten. Tim O'Brien, I don't know for you if it was what we saw in Game 2 and some of that brutality, the suspension, the fans showing up at both arenas, but it felt like, as Jared phrased it, that, yeah, they had a rivalry before. This certainly took it up a notch. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely took it up. But, I thought on the ice, right, Game 2, as physical as it was, I thought yesterday or Sunday night's game, rather, was not as physical as I thought it was going to be. I don't know. I was a little surprised. I figured in the first 5-10 minutes we would really set the tone to see what we were working with. But in terms of the fans just, traveling up and back and down the 10, I was super impressed Game 2, the amount of Reign fans that were in Acrisure Arena. I thought that was awesome. And then to see how many Firebirds were there for Game 3, just incredible. To touch on the local business and that whole drama, that's awesome. This is sports. It's playoff hockey. It's great, and it's I look at the comparison, if you're a Red Sox fan living in Yankee territory, like, yeah, I'm going to represent and bring it on, and you shouldn't have to worry about your business going under because of who you root for. But yeah, this is going to be fun. I think next year that first game against each other has potential to be really awesome. So it's super cool that it's that close. I'll tell you, to be honest with you, and Jared, obviously it's your home arena. I'll go back to Toyota Arena any day of the week. I'll go back and watch a game there for sure. That's an awesome arena, and it makes it had a hockey feel, had like an old school hockey arena feel. So yeah, buckle up, man. I hope this lasts for decades to come.
I'll also say that my experience, my first time too, last night at Toyota Arena, and the Reign fans, hey, there were like 1,000 Firebirds fans, maybe more. The Reign fans, very respectful of that. I didn't see like nastiness or, I don't know, the hockey games I grew up with, the North Stars and the Blackhawks, like that would get ugly and dirty and nasty. What I saw last night, even though there was kind of seeds planted for an atmosphere like that, Reign fans were very cool and very welcoming. I appreciated that. Andrew John, I'll bring the question to you. Something along the course of this series, anything that we mentioned that you think planted those seeds in your mind for fun rivalry, a heightened rivalry moving forward between these two teams?
Yeah, I mean, we all know that the Firebirds have, some veterans on this roster who aren't going to be here long term, or maybe not even next season. But they also the Firebirds also have this nice core of young guys, and we see some of that core, a similar core with the Reign, and I think that's going to be fun next season. See a lot of these guys take the ice against each other with, the rivalry still hot and a lot to play for. These teams should both be very good for the future, and I think that just to touch on what I think has been said previously is that it's a good thing for hockey in Southern California. We're, the people out here involved with both organizations surely want to grow the game in this part of the country where, in the Coachella Valley, we see so many new hockey fans with the Firebirds. I can't tell you how many people I've spoke to who this is their first taste of hockey. And it was very cool to go to Ontario and see that, hey, there's a cool building and a fan base here who really has a lot of energy as well. Acrisure Arena certainly does not have a monopoly on that in Southern California. So, can't say enough about how exciting that is between these two teams and what's to come.
For the previous Roundtable episode, following, or rather in the midst of the series versus Calgary, asked a question that I can now present to you, gents. And Jared, while the subject of Dan Bilesma may not necessarily pertain to the Reign, it is germane to you and the organization in that I asked the fellas last go around if we think this will be Dan Bilesma's final games coaching the Firebirds. I will be curious as to all your thoughts, and I will add or preface that I got to assume that along with being a likely candidate for the Seattle Kraken job, that he is also a potential candidate. His name has been bandied about as a future LA Kings head coach, in that, hey, not only did he play in the National Hockey League with GM Rob Blake, they played in college together. They actually shared a fun video that I found from those guys reminiscing about their days together at Bowling Green. Your opinions on that, Jared? Any insight on if you think there's potential for Dan Bylsma to be a future LA Kings head coach?
Bowling Green group is strong with the LA Kings. There's a lot of Bowling Green ties, not only Rob Blake, but assistant general manager Nelson Emerson, also a Bowling Green guy. Of course, you guys have Evan Pivnik, so another Bowling Green alum. So that's definitely strong ties. Honestly, I have no clue. I think both teams, whether it's the Kraken or the Kings, have no shortage of ample candidates. I know from the Kraken perspective, it definitely sounds like Bylsma is one of their final guys they're looking at. It sounds like they're looking at maybe Todd McClellan as well, who was the Kings coach up until middle way through this year. So I know that obviously, for Firebirds fans, it would be pretty cool to see Bylsma get that opportunity to coach in Seattle. He certainly has coached in the NHL. He's certainly done it before at the highest level. So wouldn't be surprised to see him get that job. And yeah, if the Kings were looking at him too, that would be pretty interesting. The Kings also right now have to just first of all make a decision on Jim Hiller. He technically is still the interim head coach. He was at the game last night, which is interesting to see that he wanted to be there last night. Obviously, he's interviewing for that job. He wants that job, and if he does have that job, he's going to have a lot of those Reign players that come to his team. So it was great to see that he came out to Ontario yesterday for the game. And the Kings have to figure out, do they want to stick with Jim Hiller? And if not, then there's rumors about maybe Marco Sturm moving up too. He's looking for his first NHL coaching job. He's been rumored with the San Jose Sharks, another team in California that's got a head coaching vacancy right now. So it's kind of a lot of things that have to shape out, and I don't really know how it's going to go, but it definitely seems like there's possibility for it to still go multiple ways right now.
Tim O'Brien, do you think this Firebirds playoff run, however long it may hopefully go, you think these are the last Coachella Valley days for our head coach, Dan Bylsma?
Yeah, the more I think about it, I do. I think there was no secret Rod Brindamore was a top candidate in Seattle with his connection with Ron Francis. He ends up signing the extension with Carolina. Dan doesn't give lip service. He's very candid all the time, and he loves it here. He loves the Coachella Valley. He loves to be able to golf and not feel temperatures under 70 degrees. So he's made that very clear. But I do think, how does he not at least be a finalist or get that call and have that conversation with Ron Francis? So yeah, it'll be interesting. To touch on Jared's point, I think Jim Hiller's done a fine job, right? I think he's got to at least get another look, or that he essentially saved the team, right? They played well down the stretch. They made the playoffs. Edmonton, they just ran out of steam against the Oilers. But I don't think the Kings, like I did say maybe 3 months ago, because of the Rob Blake connection. But I think it might be the end of the run. How does he not? He's done everything he can here in the AHL, right? So go ahead and get your third crack in the NHL.
Andrew, John, we've been collectively wise enough to not broach this with Dan Bylsma in any of the post-game pressers, because I think we might not be that smart, but we're smart enough to know that the timing would be poor to bring that up now and that we would not get an answer. But in your opinion, sir, do you think these are the final days, the final desert days for Dan Bylsma?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, because I think it really could go either way. I mean, it seems to be that there's enough interest in Dan, or there would be, whether it's with the Kings or the Kraken, maybe somewhere else. But I would think, especially with the Kraken, with already being in that organization, having the chance to coach guys like Joey Decord and Ty Cartier and Shane Wright, presumably next season, Riker Evans, possibly. These guys seem, at least those four, if not more, seem very likely to be in Kraken uniforms next season. That has to be really appealing. The other thing is having gone up and watched games at Climate Pledge Arena, man, it is a cool place to watch a hockey game. These are things that would certainly be attractive to any coach, and Dan included. So if you need an answer on whether this was probably the end of the run, I would probably lean toward yes. At the same time, it can't be understated, some of the things you already mentioned about, this is the guy who's already won a Stanley Cup as a head coach. At his age, does he want to go through the NHL grind again, or maybe continue to coach what has been a very fun energetic team here where you get to golf year round and live in a beautiful place. I could see that being an appeal as well. So we'll see,
Gents, I'll ask you lastly and briefly, and we'll go snake style. Andrew, I'll go right back to you. 6 playoff wins in a row. They won 4 in a row last year, so we've set yet another franchise record. 6 consecutive postseason wins. Don't know who will play yet in the next series, whether it be Milwaukee or Grand Rapids. Confidence is high. Do you see this team, as we can state it now, whomever we play, back in the Calder Cup Championship Finals?
Yeah, I think that's the way it's going. I actually have a really close friend of mine who's a Washington Capitals fan, diehard, and by that, of course, he's a Hershey Bears fan, and he said he thought the winner of the Reign Firebirds series was definitely gonna meet the Bears, and it seems to be trending that way. Though, of course, the Firebirds can't overlook their opponent in the Western Conference Final. That's going to be a tough one as well. So I think it's probably going to be a rematch of last year's Calder Cup Final. That would be my prediction.
And Andrew is right. We are looking ahead a little bit, but Tim O'Brien, 6 straight. From what you've seen, is this team destined in your mind to return to the Calder Cup Championship Finals?
Yeah, for sure. I think they're getting stronger with each game. But with that said, another 10, 11-day layoff. I don't know. Ask me again after game 1 of the next series, and I might have a different opinion. But if right now, yeah, for sure, I think it's happening.
Jared Shafran will conclude this episode and this conversation here with you, sir. You've now seen these opponents 11 times over the course of this year. You believe that the Coachella Valley Firebirds, based on what you've seen, this team is ready to get back to the Calder Cup Championship Finals, whomever they may face?
I think if you're predicting anything other than Coachella and Hershey right now, you're just not paying attention. Both of those 2 teams are clearly the best 2 teams. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. You know what? The games still have to be played out. Milwaukee is definitely a good team. I think they've done a lot of good things this year. They're probably the favorite, although Grand Rapids won game 1 in that series. I think Grand Rapids has some good talent. I just don't think they're nearly as deep as any of the Coachella Valley. Like Coachella Valley, they're much deeper than both Milwaukee and Grand Rapids, so they have to be the favorites to get back. And Hershey's mowing through the playoffs over there on the eastern side. So, that's definitely looks like a likely matchup, and maybe I'll get out and see one of those games if it happens at Acrisure.
Jared, thank you again. I think I speak for all of us. Thank you again for the hospitality in Game 3. Thank you, despite the series closure, for still joining us. Very, very classy move. Appreciated visiting with you. Tim O'Brien, Andrew John, as always, appreciate your time. We'll look forward to continue Firebirds playoff hockey. Thanks again, gents. Appreciate all of you.
All right, thanks, Judd.
Thanks, Judd. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Judd. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Firebirds friends. It's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Fire and Ice podcast presented by Desert Willow Golf Resort. So appreciative of your time, your interest, your ears, your ongoing support of this endeavor. So long as the Firebird season skates on in concert, so goes this show. More games, more episodes of the Fire and Ice podcast. We'll be back with a couple shows for the Western Conference Finals once those get ultimately underway. And hey, the appreciation and the support for this show definitely has shown up across the course of this second season and along these playoffs, whether it be on the Birds home ice of Acrisure Arena or in the instance of Game 3 in Ontario at Toyota Arena as well. Really, really impressive Birds turnout from the fans for that game. Ample appreciation also goes to this episode's guests, the Media Roundtable panel, all-star cast of Tim O'Brien, Jared Shafran, and Andrew John. Thank you to all these gentlemen for joining. Of course, an additional tip of the cap goes to the presenting sponsor of this endeavor, Desert Willow Golf Resort. Oh, those guys, they love their birds over there. Saw them on the glass, I think, during one of the playoff games, having a good time, banging away, supporting the CV Firebirds. DesertWillow.com, that's home of the Mountain View and Firecliff courses, respectively. When you make those tee times online at desertwillow.com, you're going to notice that the Fire Cliff is undergoing some reno work over the course of this summer. So make the tee times for the Mountain View. And when you're on there poking around at desertwillow.com, also take a look at the awesome and on-site Palm Desert Golf Academy for all your swing instruction and tutelage needs. Exciting times in Firebirds country, friends. Winners of 6 straight consecutive playoff games, right back in the Western Conference Finals for a second consecutive season, right where we belong. Second time in the many seasons of Firebirds' existence. We'll look forward to seeing you when the Birds return to the ice over at Acrisure Arena for those Western Conference Finals. Until then, and always, remember, one valley, one team, rising together.